Very good. Thank you. Hereby call to order this meeting of the Lower Makefield Township Planning Commission, August 10th, 2020. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from July 27th, 2020 meeting. Any questions or concerns from the other Planning Commission members?
Nope. I'll move to approve. Oh, go ahead. You have none. I'll move to approve them.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes pass. Then the next item on the agenda is the proposed mixed-use overlay district zoning ordinance amendment recommendation. So at the last meeting, we heard regarding the traffic study and the economic study. Mr. Majewski, there were additional materials circulated this week, I believe.
That is correct. Two people who are opposed to the application had commissioned their own economic study and traffic study, and that has been submitted to the Planning Commission for your review. Those two opponents are Larry Borda and Dobby Dobson, represented by Eric Goldberg. So
do we, if the other Planning Commission members wish to discuss either of these or this submission, we're certainly open to that, but then we will wait until public comment to hear from either their representative or from these individuals. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So then, Tony and Adrian, did you have a chance to review and any thoughts on this additional submission?
Adrian?
I don't. I think it's the way I look at it is, I mean, we're reviewing an ordinance change, and last 2 weeks ago we were presented with a very, very, very high level commitment to making significant changes in the traffic flow and traffic patterns and the roads in within about a mile of the location. And it seems like I don't know how much I can comment on it or not comment. It seems like down the road with the traffic commission, and when an actual proposal for the development comes across our plate, there probably be some questions on it, but we don't have any specifics to counter or know whether it's right or wrong or anything. So that's sort of my view on it. Does that make sense?
Tony, thoughts?
Yeah, I just had a comment on it. We've received a rather detailed traffic study purportedly from Larry Borda and Dobby Dobson, both of whom, in particular, Mr. Dobson is associated with a group that's been talking about this on social media for months now. And I think it looks pretty clear that these two individuals haven't paid for this report on their own. I think if the town is going to even consider looking at that report, we need to know who's paying for it, and we need to know what their motivations are. If I'm wrong and Mr. Borda and Mr. Dobson have paid for this on their own, well, God bless them. But I would bet that they wouldn't say that, and maybe they'll tell me that I'm wrong. But if they have not paid for it and it's a competing supermarket or owner of a shopping center in Lower Makefield, I think the residents deserve to know who's paid for it and can then have a better ability to evaluate its contents. So that's really my prime comment about it. I did have, Ross, before we go to public comment, I did have two other comments on things that we already talked about last week. And is now, I don't know if now's a good time or later.
Well, I have a couple thoughts on this additional submission as well before we get to those to
Okay.
backtrack to last week. And Fred, Mr. Weiss, you raised your hand. Was that with regards to this traffic submission?
Yes,
floor
Rob.
yours.
I just want to remind the commission that the township traffic engineers have weighed in on the scope of the traffic improvements and found them to be more than adequate. So, going forward with any public comment on the traffic study, the township is already satisfied with the nature of the traffic improvements going into this project.
Very good. Thank you. My additional comment when reading through this, what spoke to me at our last meeting, and Mr. Williams, I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to review this report, and perhaps I just missed it. What was important to me that was in your report a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, was that the analysis of what will happen to traffic years from now if nothing else is done. And that obviously showed some level of concern. Again, I might have missed it, but I don't believe that is part of this report and analysis. And I think that that lack of additional information and comparison of what's going to happen in the future without any additional amendments to or changes to the traffic pattern speaks volumes. Of course, when either Mr. Border or Mr. Dobson or the representative has an opportunity to comment in the public section, welcome to hear if I'm wrong or any contrary views to that. And Mr. Williams, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that.
So I was out of town last week, so I haven't had a chance to go through it in great detail. I think we would be more prepared after this evening, should this move, or when this moves to a public hearing, should it move to a public hearing. But I have taken an initial look at it. There are several comments throughout the document that proposes that the scope of our study was somehow inaccurate or incorrect. As was stated already this evening, we have satisfied the township's traffic engineer with regard to the scope of the study. We're very comfortable with the scope of the study. But at the end of the day, these are state roads and PennDOT has jurisdiction. And what I'll tell you, and hopefully this gives some confidence, added confidence to the Planning Commission and to the township, that at the end of the day, we will respect whatever PennDOT says we have to do with regard to the traffic study and with regard to traffic improvement. So there are still plenty of bites at the apple in this process. To your comments with regard to the analysis, so there are some there are some conclusions drawn in this report with regard to traffic conditions and how those traffic conditions will function in the future under the mixed use zoning, as well as under the current approvals, under the current special exception approvals. However, I think what's missing in this report does not reflect traffic conditions and traffic operations with the $6.5 million worth of traffic improvements that have been offered. So yes, I'll agree that on the surface, again, I haven't reviewed it in great detail, but the mixed use overlay does generate more traffic than what would otherwise be permitted to be developed on the site. We would agree with that. But this report does not recognize the $6.5 million worth of improvements that are being offered. And with those improvements, not only are we mitigating the impact of the mixed use overlay development, but we're also improving traffic to better conditions than they are today. And so to me, that's sort of a very important and missing ingredient in this traffic analysis. So in my view, it's really not complete in that regard.
Thank you. Any other comments on traffic report and this submission before we move to Mr. Bush's other comments from the previous meeting? Yes, Ms. Kirk.
I would just, for the record, make it clear, and Mr. Majewski can verify the date that this final version of the ordinance was submitted to the Bucks County Planning Commission and what their response has been to date, so that it is on our record that this Planning Commission was awaiting a reply from Bucks County.
The ordinance was submitted to Bucks County Planning Commission, I believe it was on July 2nd, 2020, and we still have not received the letter from the Bucks County Planning Commission with their comments.
So noted. Thank you. Mr. Bush, you had a couple of comments you wanted to add in.
Yeah, yes, I do. Thank you. Just picking up where Jim just left off with the Bucks County Planning Commission. I guess the issue we have is, regardless of it, they know the deadline of when this advertised ordinance was going to be voted on by the Board of Supervisors. So is that correct, Jim?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So if they were going to comment or wanted to comment, they've had the opportunity to do so, right?
Correct.
At the last meeting, when we were talking about the road improvements, I had asked about the exit ramp off of what had been 95 South, and I'd asked if there had been any communications with PennDOT about it, because in my view, it was a problem that both PennDOT and the Delaware River Joint Bridge Toll Commission exacerbated by their recent road improvements. And the answer was that no, but it was planned. And I think that answer came from the applicant. What I'm wondering, Jim, is has the township had any conversations already with PennDOT about that intersection specifically?
Yes, we actually discussed the entire scope of the traffic study with PennDOT, and specifically that intersection. They had some concerns just about how it actually had to be approached, not the actual idea of what we're doing, but the approvals that would need to be done based on the configuration of it. Maybe Mr. Williams could better summarize that, since he's a traffic engineer.
Certainly. So since the last meeting we had before this Planning Commission, we have started the conversations with PennDOT regarding the scope of the traffic study and an overview of the improvements. We have yet to receive anything formal from PennDOT in writing with regard to their assessment of what we've prepared thus far, but we did have a conversation, and we talked about many of the same things that we discussed with the Planning Commission at our last meeting. In fact, all of the same things that we discussed with the Planning Commission at our last meeting. With regard to the off-ramp intersection, we did specifically mention that intersection. PennDOT was very supportive and favorable as to, with regard to the improvements that are being suggested and offered in connection with this development, to modify the intersection, modify the traffic signal to include the right turn movement off the off-ramp, and to provide double right turn lanes coming off the off-ramp. So the initial response from PennDOT is very supportive for those improvements. I'll also mention that the group that we're speaking to at PennDOT that governs this process that we have to follow is different from the group at PennDOT that would have been in charge of the improvements to I-95 or I-295 as part of that major capital project. It's a different group within PennDOT.
Yeah. But it's a different group, but where the rubber hits the road, it's the same issue.
Well, the group, yes, it is the same issue. And the group that we're speaking to now is the group that governs our responsibility in this process to mitigate our traffic impact and to provide the necessary improvements to accommodate the traffic from this development. So at the end of the day, whatever improvements we offer, they have final authority on what those improvements can be. And although they haven't reviewed them in detail yet, the initial response was favorable.
Thank you. And I guess just the last issue I had run some calculations. We previously talked about parking lot size, and I guess in the ordinance as it's currently drafted talks about 9 by 18, 9 feet wide by 18 feet long. My concern, which I raised before, was that vehicles are getting bigger and bigger, and it's getting in a supermarket parking lot where cars are going in and out. We're creating an issue if the spots are too narrow. For purposes of illustration, I just looked at what a standard Ford Explorer is, because you see a lot of those on the road. Counting the mirrors on the side, it's about 90 inches. So we're looking at 108 inches, which is more than I thought. I was thinking this was under 100, but it's really 90 inches versus 108. So it's basically if somebody pulls right in the middle of the spot, 9 inches on each side. I'm not sure that that's enough, but that's something maybe, I don't know if the other planning commission members feel differently, or I know at our last meeting, people were generally not opposed to 9 by 18, but wanted to see a wider cartway, perhaps within the parking lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still an issue for you, Adrian, or not.
It's not an issue, and I'm not professing to be an expert. I think if I see a drawing right now and I go out and take measurements in the ShopRite parking lot, and they're the same as what they're proposing, I'm not going to be happy with that. And I think most people wouldn't be happy with that. So I don't know if it's 9.5 feet, and the width of the lanes where the traffic actually flows. The way I look at the ShopRite lot, to me, and I can't remember what we said those weren't. Those aren't. I have an F-150, so sometimes I have to just park a little farther away from cars, but a lot of that has to do with turning radius into the spot more than space in the spot. So that's still my concern, and I'd ask them, not, just to keep that in mind. And we're talking about there's one potential developer that's coming in, and every Wegmans lot I've been into in the past has been sufficient for anything I've driven. So it's been different. So I would just hope that they would follow their sort of standard guidelines for that.
So, question, is there a standard size parking lot space in a Wegmans parking lot?
So the parking spaces of 9 by 18 are approved parking sizes for Wegmans, and the commission's been talking about the travel lanes. So, the ordinance at one of our meetings back last September, that was discussed, and the through lanes with traffic in both directions were increased to 24 feet from the original proposal. And I believe they're 12-foot minimum if it's one-way traffic. So some of the questions or concerns were raised about the turning radius in. I think that's mitigated by the width of the travel lanes between parking aisles.
And Tony, if I may add, one of the issues with the Oxford Oaks parking lot, that area in front of the ShopRite, there are 8 entrances off the main aisle that goes in front of the supermarket. And that's because the depth of the parking lot is pretty shallow. I think they only have about, at most 15 parking spaces before you hit the end. And that's sort of the problem, whereas like the Giant supermarket is a lot more spread out. You have probably 25 spaces and I think 4 or 5 aisles going through there. So you have less through traffic interfering with people pulling in and out. And that's sort of the issue with the Oxford Oaks. It's more crowded. Sort of like the McCaffrey's parking lot. It's the same thing. It's not that deep, especially when you get down to the end where Ginger Walk is and Villa Rosa. It's a little bit narrow getting in there. People are pulling in and out, trying to find spots.
Jim, are the spaces in the giant shopping center the same width as the spaces in the ShopRite shopping center? Is that what you're saying?
Hold on a second, I'll check.
I'm just doing a quick Google Earth measurement in the ShopRite. There is 9 by 18 parking spaces with a 24-foot parking aisle width. I'd have to go up and, this is the ShopRite down at the intersection of Oxford Valley Road and Big Oak Road.
Yes.
Right.
The Giant supermarket is a mix of 9-foot and 10-foot spaces. About 2/3 are 10-foot wide spaces and 1/3 are 9-foot spaces.
Very interesting, to say the least. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
I don't have anything else about what we talked about last week.
Okay. Adrian, any additional comments from you? Now that we've had a time to review reports and.
No additional comments. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Majewski or Mr. Kirk, what additional procedural steps we need to take before we open for public comment?
Nothing.
Any other documents or things that you gentlemen wish to review? If not, if you're satisfied with what you've reviewed and have questioned Mr. DeLuca about, as well as Mr. Williams, you can close testimony at or just proceed to open it to public comment.
Do we need to take a vote on that, or?
No.
Okay. Then Tony, Adrian, let's move on to public comment unless you object.
Okay.
Very good.
We have one caller, Virginia. I'm bringing her in now.
Hello, Virginia.
Yes,
Hi. Thank you very much
Yes,
for
hello.
calling in.
thank you. Should I go ahead or?
Yes, please go right ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Virginia.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
This is Barbara Kirk, the attorney for the township.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, before you proceed to your comment, they just identified you as Virginia, so could you state your full name and address or the group that you're with?
Yes, certainly. It's Virginia Torbert. That's T-O-R, B as in boy, E-R-T.
Mm-hmm.
And I am the chairperson of the Citizens Traffic Commission of Lower Makefield.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the Planning Commission for this opportunity. I just have a few comments. One is kind of process. The revised final version of the proposed ordinance, will it include at the end a map that clearly delineates the, what area is being covered by the ordinance?
Yes.
Thank you.
Because the first version I saw had a map that was very hard to make head or tails out of. It didn't have any roadways labeled. There was nothing, no way to orient yourself. And I would highly recommend a better quality map at the end so that any resident looking at that can, tell exactly where it is and exactly what the boundaries are that are proposed. So that's just my first comment. My second comment is, I agree with all the comments about parking. It would be wonderful to have the wider parking spaces. I understand that could be a problem, but obviously it's already been said, I drive a Hyundai Sonata, so it's not going to be any easier when I'm between two SUVs, but you've already discussed that. My main comment was regarding the section of the ordinance where it talks about interconnected pedestrian and vehicle driveways. And I know the developer is proposing something going toward Edgewood Village in terms of pedestrian. I don't think there's anything proposed, either vehicle or pedestrian, to connect this proposed development to the corporate center, the LMT corporate center, the north one, or the south one for that matter, but the north one's on the same side of the street. I was just wondering if that's something that could be considered, because if ideally there are synergies involved here and the corporate center, you know, starts to become more populated, it seems kind of silly to have those folks have to come out, make a left, go up, make a left into the proposed development. And I wondered if any consideration has been given to, at the very least, a pedestrian access, but also maybe a vehicle access.
Mr. DeLuca, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, yes, I can. So we have talked to the owners of the North Campus. They are in line with the pedestrian connection. We've had several discussions about the vehicle connection. They understand the benefits, but they would like to wait till they complete their renovation to their parking area to see how their traffic and parking is before they make a final commitment. But we've had the discussion. We agree it makes a lot of sense for both the North Campus and for the commercial site. It is private property and we need their consent to make that connection, but we will do it if we are able to obtain their consent.
That is great, because I would really encourage that, because, and also even for pedestrian traffic going back and forth between Shady Brook. I don't know if there's any way to make that safer, but I know that's, now that that's going to be signalized, it seems to me that would also make sense, but I would just encourage that. And finally, I just wanted to say that I was very pleasantly surprised. I think I caught some of the last meeting where the proposed traffic improvements were, I think it was 6.5 million in traffic improvements that are proposed. And they match very nicely with what the CTC had recommended in our yearly update to the Board of Supervisors. Because of course, as we all know, that area from the ramp, the 295 ramp to Stony Hill, is the highest accident area in the township. And that, as I think Tony brought out, when this Delaware Valley, when the Scudder Falls Bridge project came about, some of us tried back then to say, hey, you know, you're making this 6 lanes and you're doing all these improvements over in New Jersey, but you're not doing anything for the Newtown interchange. And that was very disappointing, because, I mean, I guess we'll see what happens to all this traffic, but and I personally think, and I think the commission agrees with me, that, you know, the intersection of that 295 ramp and the bypass really needs to be, you know, improved, reconfigured, whatever. And that needs to be done. And the 2 lanes, left turn lanes into Stony Hill, have needed to be done for a while. So I just wanted to mention that I thought the improvements that the developer is recommending are very robust, and I was very pleased to see that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Next, we have Catherine from Citizens Traffic Commission.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you for joining us. Can you please state your full name and your address?
Yes, my full name, Catherine Calabria, 1500 Miller Place. I'm serving on the Citizens Traffic Commission with Virginia Torbett, who just spoke. I have a couple comments. The first one is regarding the parking space. There were discussions on July 23rd 7th, I think, the last the meeting previous to this one. And just now I also heard a little bit of discussion about the parking size. So 9 by 18 is tight. I did a parking study for a client a few years ago, and they recommended for a place like a shopping center where people flow in and out, you know, this constant activity. The recommended parking space size is actually 12 feet wide. Now, I know real estate is expensive and we're trying to optimize the number of parking spaces, but 9 feet is definitely tight. And there's been some acknowledgement that, you know, cars are getting bigger and bigger. And a gentleman said he has I think a Ford truck, and if he tries to open his doors, you know, that leaves him 8 inches on either side. So 9 feet is fine if you are commuting to a place to work and you leave your car parked there all day and you're only getting in and out, you know, once or twice a day. But in a place like a shopping center, Wegmans, you know, McCaffrey's, Giants, whoever, wherever, those spaces need to be wider than 9 feet. And the second comment that I have is the traffic study. I was, you know, encouraged by the results of the traffic study. However, I don't believe that the Shady Brook Farm holiday light show traffic and any other special events taking place at Shady Brook Farm, if that was taken into account in the level of service study for the one signalized intersection into the new development across from the Shady Brook Farm driveway. So when the study eventually gets refined and gets presented to PennDOT, gets submitted to PennDOT for review and approval, we would like to see the Shady Brook Farm special events accounted for in the level of service study. So those are the two comments that I have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Williams, I know that the Shady Brook special events was mentioned in your discussion 2 weeks ago. I know that not everybody who's watching tonight was able to see that. Could you do a quick synopsis of how that factors into your traffic study?
Sure. So, I mean, I think it goes without saying, if the mixed use overlay is not improved, and the traffic improvements that go with it are not constructed, then things will just continue as they are today. Meaning Shady Brook Farm will still hold special events. There will be a lot of traffic coming from Shady Brook Farm, and it will be difficult to move about the area during those special events. However, with this development and with the improvements, we are fixing traffic better than current conditions. So again, it would sort of logic would then indicate that in the surrounding area, even with the mixed use development and with now the added benefit of the improvements, we will be in a much better situation in the future and being able to accommodate the Shady Brook Farm special event traffic in the future than we're able to today. Furthermore, we did take it one additional step. We did not specifically study Shady Brook Farm's traffic. That's really not our responsibility as we see it, but we know it's important. And so we did do a sensitivity analysis, and we took a look at our access, and our main access to the center with the traffic signal will be aligned directly opposite Shady Brook Farm's main access. So we took a look at, well, how much additional traffic can we add to the intersection above and beyond the traffic that we generate? And what we found is even with our added traffic from the mixed use overlay development, Prickett Preserve, even above that traffic, we can handle approximately 500 to 600 additional trips, and that intersection will still work acceptably. So again, it's sort of, if we do nothing, conditions will continue to be bad. But with this development and with the improvements, conditions will be better for Shady Brook Farm traffic. I feel comfortable saying that. So that's sort of the depth at which we've looked at it thus far.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have any
A
additional
follow-up
public comment?
please. Hello. I'd like to make
Hello?
a follow-up comment. Can I make a follow-up comment? Hello.
I guess not.
Yes, we have Lee coming in.
Can I make a follow-up comment?
Lee, thank you for joining us tonight. Could you please state your full name and address?
Yeah, just one thing. That young lady before me wanted to make a follow-up comment. Can she?
Yes.
Lee, could you give your name and address?
Oh, yeah. It's Lee Pedowitz at 247 Truman Way in Yardley.
Catherine.
Can she re-enter later on, I guess
Yeah.
was the question, to offer additional public comment or a question?
Can I? I'm not sure if you guys can hear me. Can I make a
Are
follow-up
you asking me, Mr.?
Procedurally, somebody who has a better answer than I do, I see.
Okay.
Yes, you will be
Typically,
able
when
to.
somebody makes a comment or addresses the board with
Just
their
let me know when I
views,
can speak.
that's usually it. However, in light of the type of matter before this board, if you're so inclined to allow somebody to come back up, that's fine. Keep in mind the volume of people we had on the first informal review and how frequently people wanted to come up again and make an additional comment. So it's a balancing act. It's going to be at your discretion.
Well, Lee, since you seem to know that she had an additional comment or question, and if you happen to know what that comment or question is, and feel free to ask that as well, just to speed the entire.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I don't know what she had to say, but she kept breaking in, asking if she could have a follow-up comment. So I don't know if you want to take her before me or what.
Why don't you please proceed, and then we'll figure out the rest.
Oh, okay, sure. It's Lee Pedowitz. I think I hit you with this already. Lee Pedowitz, 247 Truman Way in Yardley. I just have a couple of comments. And one, Mr. Majewski's familiar with, and this has to apply. This would apply to the mixed overlay use. I live right near the Caddis development off of Oxford Valley Road, and they ripped up some of the sidewalk, and it's heavily traveled pedestrian-wise. And they've done nothing to accommodate the pedestrian traffic, especially in this era of the pandemic. There are a lot more bike riders, a lot of people walking. And I just sent Mr. Majewski a letter saying that in any future projects that the Planning Commission or the board should consider, they should consider what disruption to pedestrian traffic there would be. Just something that the developer should take into account and provide for if it's going to be for any length of time. But my second comment was when I listened to the Planning Commission meeting the last time, the gentleman who was giving the traffic study report, I was intrigued by the detail and the specificity. But when he said he had only driven these roads for 2 or 3 times, I mean, that to me, that was a real big negative. I'm an engineer, and over the years, I was involved with projects, and when people were giving us work to do and they weren't familiar with what was out in the field, it became a nightmare. And I just want to bring that to the board's attention. I would hope that the people that put this traffic study together would drive these roads more than 2 or 3 times and get a feel for what it's like. So thank you very much for your attention, and stay well.
Thank you, Lee.
There's no further comments unless you would like to bring Catherine back in.
Unless any of the fellow members object, if she's still on the line and would like to ask that follow-up question, given that there are no other comments, that's absolutely fine. Catherine, welcome back.
Hi, I'm sorry.
Procedurally, again, if you don't mind just restating your full name and address, and then.
Sure, no problem. My name is Catherine Calabria. I live at 1500 Miller Place, and I'm on the Citizens Traffic Commission. Sorry, I was trying to get another comment in, and there were some issues with trying to speak. So I want to go back to the traffic study, the proposed signalized intersection with the Shady Brook access. So I do understand that the Shady Brook development, as far as that, the study, the traffic study, if there is ever one to come about, that it's not the responsibility of the current applicant's traffic engineer to study that. But I'm talking about the holiday light show, something that's happening right now. So I don't see that the study is complete if you're trying to study the level of service at that proposed signalized intersection. That study is complete if you don't include the traffic that's going into the Shady Brook holiday light show. And there are other special events like the antique, antique car show on weekends, and there's the haunted hay rides and other seasonal events. So I think that needs to be included. The traffic that's generated by those events need to be included in the intersection study. And I understand what I think it's Mr. Williams. I think when he said that there's a additional capacity of 500 cars, but I mean, that's all well and good, but you need to run the model and you need to show what the level of service actually is when you add the amount of traffic that goes to the light show.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, I believe your previous answer speaks for itself, and it's possible Catherine did not hear the full answer given the audio technical difficulties she might have been having. So I will consider that resolved unless you have further additional comment. Very good.
Yeah, no additional comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I believe we're through public comments. And Ms. Kirk, any further procedural before, if either the Planning Commission members choose to make a motion to vote on the resolution?
Sorry, I forgot I was on mute. No other procedural comments. I just want to point out to the commission members that if you're inclined to proffer a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, now would be an appropriate time. If I'm not sure how you want to do this, if you want to do it in a overall format or go through each of the specific sections of the proposed ordinance, since there's so much involved, or whether somebody has any general comments. But any type of recommendation would be a motion to either recommend approval or denial of the proposed ordinance, or it could take no action and leave it to the discretion of the township supervisors. That's all within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission.
Very good, thank you. And I will say that of all the matters before us in this ordinance, the one we seem to be focused on the most, at least tonight, is the parking issue. So if the Planning Commission wanted to single that out, I will comment that I am in line with Anthony and Adrian's thoughts on that general idea and that issue. To perhaps highlight that for the Board of Supervisors is an option, but gentlemen, preference as to a general recommendation or lack thereof, or item by item approach.
I think Adrian's
on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. I'm kind of the same mindset of Ross. I think the only comments I would want to maybe add is something about making sure we address the parking issues that have sort of been endemic in our town in the various parking lots around, and making sure we don't create another issue like that again. And also just, I mean, this is more procedural, but make sure we include that map in the ordinance in some clear and detailed way, so anyone that opens up the ordinance can kind of see exactly where and how those pieces of land apply to the overlay district.
So if I can ask, when you say about the parking issues, is it the general consensus that when they get to the section dealing with parking standards, is it the recommendation of this board that the perpendicular parking spaces be enlarged from 9 to 18 feet? Or is it just a general recommendation that the Board of Supervisors pay particular attention to the parking standards and provide consideration as to what would be best for this site?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, before we get to whether it's a more general statement or a more specific statement, Jim, you had mentioned that the giant parking lot was 2/3 10 feet wide and 2/3 9 feet wide, right?
Correct.
Do you know how that happened? Was there something that quirky that led to that? What led to that?
I'm not sure. I would guess that probably during the land development process, they probably opined that it would be a good idea to have the spaces that have the largest turnover, those closest to the doors, have a 10-foot wide width, and then those along the periphery and along the edges, further away from where you'd park the less commonly used spaces, that those be 9 foot. It should be noted the ordinance says it's a minimum 9 foot by 18 space. So during the land development process, the Planning Commission could always recommend that you go with a 10-foot space for those ones that are closer to the doors, those ones that have the greater turnover. If that makes sense.
And yeah, and I guess I'm personally not so hung up on any one specific, not being a traffic expert and a parking lot expert, but I look at the various lots in our area that we have problems with, and it's a combination of a lot of things. It's two-way traffic in narrow aisles. It's maybe too narrow parking spots. They're all perpendicular to the lane, and maybe you can go one way, and angled parking spaces. There's a lot of different ways in my mind you can make improvements to a parking lot, and I'm not going to profess to know what the best ways are versus the other. And my thoughts on this are not to handcuff anyone to any particular solution. I just don't, I would like to have some verbiage in there. So I don't even know how you put the verbiage in, but just, it's gotta be better than what we've ended up with in the past. And I Tony, you might be better. You've been around this game longer than me. Ross, you may have some perspective on it, but that's sort of my feelings on it. Is we just need to make sure we're not trying to squeeze too many things into a poorly designed inflow, outflow, and parking place area.
Well, I appreciate the way Ms. Kirk phrased the latter part of her option in order to vote on this, which was just a general recommendation to consider. Because like you, Adrian, someone smarter than me can make this determination, and I understand everything's a trade-off. So if you were to recommend larger parking areas, that means other things are hurt by that action. And I would want, again, someone who has a better understanding of those ramifications to make that determination. It is very fascinating that the giant parking lot has a mix of larger and smaller spaces, because that seems to address Catherine, I apologize, I don't recall her last name, mentioned that the high turnover spots, 9 feet is not sufficient. Well, the higher turnover spots would have a larger space and seem to address some of that. But whether I feel comfortable making a recommendation with that specificity, I really don't.
Exactly.
I'm with both of you.
So let's turn to the larger issue then. Maybe we went in the wrong order. Are we putting that one issue aside, all other aspects of the ordinance? Do we feel comfortable voting on that as a general vote, or do we care to break them down by the individual ordinance section?
I'm okay voting generally.
Yeah, I am okay with voting generally too. I mean,
would someone care to make a motion?
Yeah.
Somehow remembering the wise words that Ms. Kirk offered. Yes, and she has a point as well. Yes.
Do you want me to proffer a proposed motion for the commission?
I believe that would be most appreciated.
that would be great.
So if this commission were inclined, the motion would be to recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors of the mixed-use overlay district in the form as presented and dated June 26, 2020, with the following conditions. 1, that the Board of Supervisors carefully review and consider the parking standards as set forth in the proposed ordinance to try to minimize the adverse parking conditions if a development were to be constructed. And the second would be, if this ordinance becomes accepted and approved by the Board of Supervisors, that a map outlining the overall area which would be affected by this ordinance be attached to the final version.
And,
I'll make that. I'll make that motion.
Jim, did you have a comment?
Mr. Pokel had texted me and pointed out that if you go on Google Earth, the giant supermarket are actually physically constructed as 9-foot wide spaces. And I confirm that.
Interesting. That's really interesting. There you go.
There's nothing to stop you from making the condition anyway for us to look at.
No, I think it's a good condition, and I think it's I think we have enough history in this township, at least in my time here, that let's make sure if we do this, let's do it right and don't make it such a headache for people to drive in and drive out of there.
So there is a motion that it was made.
Yep.
I'm not sure if there has been a second yet to that motion.
I will second the motion.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen. I believe a formal recommendation will be typed and provided to the supervisors by Mr. Majewski in time for the special meeting on August 17th.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, Ross, are we done?
I believe we are. Motion to adjourn. Anyone?
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
You gentlemen have a fine night. Thank you, Ms. Kirk. Thank you, Mr. Majewski. Thank you, Mr. Bockel.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss.